Serial Experiments Lain has been on my watch list for a very long time, and I finally gotten around to watching it recently. I didn't really know much about the series beforehand, only that it is quite experimental and unique, and now that I've seen it, I have some thoughts. One of the first things you'll notice when watching Serial Experiments Lain is how quiet it is. Oftentimes you wouldn't hear anything other than some ambient noise in the background, most notably the constant buzzing from the ever-present telephone lines, and as they start to incorporate more shots focusing on the utility poles supporting said telephone lines, it becomes almost an aesthetic that we now associate with the world of Serial Experiments Lain, one that feels increasingly disorienting the more they focus on it. And thematically it makes sense. One of the issues brought up by our characters in the series revolves around the lines between reality and the Wired beginning to blur, and so this constant buzzing could symbolize the growing infiltration of the Wired into the real world. This blurring of reality and the Wired extends to the visuals of the series as well. In a lot of scenes where shadows are present in the background, these blood pools are found hidden within those shadows to once again signify the presence of the Wired starting to seep into their reality. In another way, it shows how the Wired is constantly at the back of people's minds, since one of the plotlines of Serial Experiments Lain is about the growing appeal of the Wired as an alternate reality, where people can live a better life with a better persona compared to what they have and are in the real world. There's also a repetitive shot found in the opening scene of most episodes, where they show the same shot of the utility poles, traffic lights, some cars swerving on the road. It becomes monotonous by the third or fourth episode, but I guess that's the point. It almost felt routine with the way the show starts each episode, and it actually reflects the mood of the series itself, that life in the real world is boring and monotonous. As the series progresses, more and more characters commit suicide in order to live forever in the Wired, quote-unquote, because the latter is portrayed as this new, exciting place to be, whereas back in the real world, everyone just goes about their daily lives repeating the same old routines, much like how we live in the real world. Another defining characteristic of the visuals of Serial Experiments Lain is how empty some of the scenes look. There would be barely anything around in the scene, and a character, usually Lain herself, would walk around this vast, empty space. It reflects Lain's perception of the real world, one defined by loneliness, disillusionment, and bleakness, where everything is escaping away from her, and there is nothing for her to interact with, once again contrasting with the bombardment of information in the world of the Wired, and so it makes sense for her growing obsession with the latter as the series went on. While I found the technical aspects of the series captivating, I wasn't able to care as much about the plot and the characters here, two elements of a story that I would usually pay most attention to in any other case. This doesn't mean that these aspects are done poorly in Serial Experiments Lain, it's just that, because the story is laid out in such a way where things remain super confusing throughout the series until near the end, it made it much harder for me to care about the protagonist and their goals, especially when I'm constantly confused by the direction the story was going for. However, I do think I would find greater enjoyment in a rewatch, now that I'm armed with the benefit of hindsight in terms of what the story was actually about, especially since the ending made Lain's journey much clearer and relatable. I guess this is one of those shows where you have to watch a second time to get a more complete experience out of it, but until then, even if I found it memorable, I'd say I wasn't able to enjoy it as much as I wanted, given how bland it felt at times during the middle portion.